coming up.
It's two large environmental chambers where we can take the temperature down to -20, up to +40.
From Nordic cold to Saharan heat, researchers test the limits of civilian infrastructure in a multi-million-dollar project that could help future homes withstand extreme weather events.
I promised your mother I would look after her.
An HBO series raises fears of a real-life parasitic fungus, but is there any truth to concerns it could control the human mind? What is the scariest fungi you know of that human beings need to be wary of?
I would go for a fungi called Aspergillus.
And why are scientists keeping a close eye on our warming planet's effect on these complex organisms? And after more than a decade of tough talks, a promising UN treaty is signed, one that could stop harmful fishing practices and to prevent vulnerable marine life from being lost.
I'm Kate Werner, the Senior Campaigns Manager at People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals in the UK. We're really pleased that a global ocean treaty has just been passed, but there's plenty more work to be done. This is Just 2 Degrees on TRT World.
It is not a fun summer for Argentinians. It's extremely hot there. Actually, the hottest season on record in decades. There are headache-inducing temperatures up to 55% above average. There's also been a lot less rain. It's damaged agriculture and kept the country under a weather alert. The first of many heat waves began last November in the spring.
Ha habido días de mucho calor en marzo, pero no con la continuidad que ha sido este año, que ha sido, creo que por los últimos 15 o 20 años no ha habido tanto calor. Atención, yo mismo hace una semana fui a tomarme la presión, pero yo creo que es la primera vez que me la tomo en 15 años.
Hey, have you seen this HBO series people are talking about? It's called The Last of Us. It's pretty popular these days and based on a video game about a group of people in search of a cure to a very, very strange disease. Take a look.
There's that hospital that Firefly mentioned. This is where we get off.
We finish what we started.
Welcome to the Fireflies.
Let me see her, please.
She's being prepped for surgery. I knew her since she was born. I promised your mother I would look after her.
Where's the operating room?
There's no halfway with this. After all we've been through. Can't be for nothing.
So in this HBO series, a fungus that's adapted to a hotter world infects human beings and takes control of their minds. It's not a far-fetched idea. In the natural world, something similar happens. The Ophiocordyceps unilateralis, more commonly known as the zombie ant fungus, is found predominantly in tropical forests like the Amazon. The fungus enters the ant's exoskeleton and slowly takes over its behavior. Helpless insect is then compelled to seclude itself from the safety of its hill and is immobilized while the fungus slowly feeds on its innards. But is the HBO series The Last of Us showing us a potential future? I spoke with the founder of the Institute for Global Food Security, Professor Chris Elliott. We've been getting a lot of questions and emails about what's been happening on television, the land of fiction, when it comes to fungi and if they could potentially affect us. For example, I'd just like to get your response firstly on whether or not we can see in the future fungi that can take over human minds.
Well, that's great to talk to you, Reagan, and thank you for that scary thought to start with. So I think in terms of fungi, bacteria, viruses, there's always an opportunity for them to invade our bodies. You know, they're pretty good at that. And there are some of these that actually do affect the brain. But I have to say, in my list of concerns, global concerns, being invaded by a fungi isn't in the top 20, okay?
Chris, can you talk a bit about how prevalent fungi is in the, say, atmosphere, in the air we breathe? How do they get into our bodies?
I mean, in terms of prevalence, fungi can travel by air, but they have to travel by something like moisture. Okay, that's where the fungi, and always, the worry about fungi is, if people's houses are damp and aren't dry properly, you get fungal growth. And what those fungi do is they produce spores, and the spores are like the seeds of fungi, and that's how you breathe them in, and they can get into your lungs. So that the primary point of infection of humans is actually in our respiratory system.
We're also getting reports that global warming, the warming planet, could potentially cause more and faster mutations in fungi, eventually leading to one that is very harmful to humans. Your response?
And actually, that's much more of a serious concern. I think the change to our climate, and it's not just about warming of the climate, it's about changing temperatures, changing rainfall patterns. Really, there are some areas of the world now that are very, very prone to massive fungal infections. And it's actually not us are the primary target. It's our food crops, particularly cereals. And more crops are becoming infected with fungi in different parts of the world. And some of those fungi, they're called toxigenic fungi. They produce really, really nasty toxins called mycotoxins. And if we consume the food that contains those mycotoxins, it can have really adverse effects on to us. So there's already many people on our planet suffer from diseases related to these toxins. And I think the scary statistic I would say is, from the work that we have done, somewhere between 60 and 80% of all crops now contain these mycotoxins.
One last question to you, Chris. I read a report recently about mushrooms, which are a type of fungi. Mushrooms that scientists at NASA are looking at potentially using to create stronger, better, sturdier houses, possibly on Mars. Do you know anything more about this?
Mushrooms are a form of fungi, and there are many, many different types of fungi. And we're used to, eating mushrooms, but they have a huge opportunity to be used for many, many different things. Because actually the strands of the fungi themselves, the mycelium, they're really pretty strong, and there's multiple uses for these fungi. So, in my area of food science, we're now thinking about how to use fungi as food packaging materials to replace plastics. So there's a lot of activity, a lot of action in mushrooms in different parts of the world now. It's an exciting space.
What is the scariest fungi you know of that human beings need to be wary of?
I would go for a fungi called Aspergillus. And the reason I say Aspergillus is that produces one of the most deadly toxins in the world called aflatoxin. That can kill people.
There are lots of questions about how well our homes would hold up against extreme weather, stronger winds, floods, much higher or lower temperatures. So Britain's University of Salford are stress testing how houses in the future may need to be constructed. It's a $19 million project that subjects the buildings to conditions mimicking everything from Nordic winters, among the coldest in the world, to Saharan summers, brutal heat. Researchers are also hoping to determine the most effective ways to deliver zero-carbon housing and control running costs in homes. So very little of the high seas outside of national jurisdictions are under UN protection. It means pollution, acidification, and overfishing continue to pose a considerable threat to much of the ocean's marine life. But after more than 15 years of negotiations, at least 100 countries have now agreed to change that. It is a significant milestone, of course, which environmental groups hope will help reverse biodiversity loss and ensure sustainable development. The high seas make up more than 60% of the planet's surface and do not fall under any country's national boundaries. The treaty aims to conserve underwater ecosystems and establish areas where industries like fishing and trawling will be deemed as breaching international law. It would also establish ground rules for conducting environmental impact assessments for commercial activities in the ocean. If ratified, the treaty is crucial in preserving at least 30% of the planet's land and ocean by 2030, as agreed in an historic accord signed back in December in Montreal, Canada. But economic interests have been a major sticking point. Developing countries are calling for more assistance to mitigate losses in their own countries, like the implementation of a loss and damage fund and the transfer of technology. Negotiators have agreed, though, to share the marine genetic resources used in industries like biotechnology. The question now is how much of an impact the treaty will make. The environmental NGO Greenpeace says at least 11 million square kilometers of the ocean needs to be put under protection every year until 2030 to meet targets.
Yeah, so I mean, our oceans need protecting, there's no doubt about it. And so it's certainly a very welcome step that a global ocean treaty has been passed, as it acknowledges the importance of protecting these fragile ecosystems, which, you know, for far too long have been allowed to be plundered by the commercial fishing industry and other industries too. But you know, we must understand that this treaty is only the beginning. We have to have industries and governments and individuals continuing to do all they can if we are to stand a chance of protecting and saving the oceans and the animals who live there. And the best way any of us can protect sea life, marine life, is by going vegan. So Peter encourages everyone to visit our website and where they can get a free vegan, learn all about vegan fish and other sea life products.
From my understanding, about 100 countries have signed on to this treaty. Are you concerned about the ones that did not sign on? And what exactly would that mean for the treaty itself?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, you know, an evolving situation where, you know, countries can sign on later. But of course, this is a group effort, you know. Everybody plays a vital role in sustaining the ocean's entire ecosystem. Without, you know, animals like fish, for instance, other animals like whales and dolphins and seabirds and coral reefs wouldn't survive. They would starve and die. So, you know, the reality is that if current fishing trends continue, our oceans will be desolate in less than 30 years. So we have to take drastic action now, all of us, all of the countries, all of the people involved in this, because, you know, there isn't plenty of fish in the sea. And it's great. We applaud the fact that, you know, this treaty creates, amongst other things, you know, sanctuaries for 30% of the oceans in coming years, where marine life and marine ecosystems can recover and thrive, which is great. But this isn't, you know, the end point. And I think that speaks to your question that, you know, there will be more work to be done and more cohesive, collaborative work to be done.
Well, the treaty is a triumph, but would need teeth, and women are often left out of the climate change conversation. It's not the first time we've talked about the lack of representation at every level. There's no question women play a significant role in how the world functions, but they're often undervalued and unappreciated. And now more than ever, everyone needs to be brought into the fight against the climate crisis. Here are some brave women who've made their voices heard, despite the odds. Ayana Elizabeth Johnson is a marine biologist and policy expert from Brooklyn. She's co-founder of Urban Ocean Lab. That's an NGO that creates equitable, practical climate and ocean policies for the future of coastal communities. Canadian scientist Catherine Hayhoe is making a difference with her research, which is focused on assessing the impacts of the crisis on human interactions and the natural environment. She develops innovative strategies that translate future projections into relevant actions. Another climate scientist who is doing important work is Corbin, a professor at the University of East Anglia. She studies how oceans remove carbon from the atmosphere. Outside the lab, she is convincing policymakers to implement science-driven climate policies. Marine scientist from Oman, Rumatha Al-Busaida, has spent years advocating for environmental youth leadership and gender equality. She's helped develop the concept of integrated aquacultures and the promotion of food security in her country. And without people like Lizzie Daly and her love for the natural world, audiences worldwide are unaware of the fragility and fierceness that exists in the natural world. The wildlife biologist, explorer, and filmmaker from Wales travels around the world documenting nature. She's worked on numerous TV productions. Here's Lizzie on some of her daring adventures.
We are going kayaking in the beautiful northern Norwegian fjords in winter season, so it's about -3 at the moment, and we're heading out with Element's Arctic Camp to go and find some wildlife.
These guys are absolutely amazing. This is what jungle life is really all about. It's these invertebrates that transform this landscape. They're so important for recycling back into the natural environment here. They're the 27s, and they are literally passing the headland just here, and they're coming right for us. I can see them.
Let's speak now with Fauzia Bilkis Malik, Program Coordinator for the International Union for Conservation of Nature in Pakistan. Fauzia, it's great chatting with you. Great seeing you. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Trying to hold on in this climate crisis. It feels super odd in 2023 talking about how valuable women are. In the struggle against the climate crisis, just talk a bit about the limitations for women across the board, from the home to the workplace.
Yeah, I think it's quite challenging in many ways, because in the situation of disasters or the climate change that induces the disasters, natural hazards that happen, they limit the opportunities for women. They restrict their chances for the livelihood or other education, other opportunities. They limit with respect to their institution, which is their home in particular, and also if they are working, it limits their opportunities, the access, and also reduce their burden, increase their burden, because there are responsibilities for supplying food, water, and all the other necessities of life for the family, for the children. That increases, and then multifolds their burden, reduces their time for any other thing that they could do. So it is a many-folds the crisis that is for the women with respect to, in comparison to the men. So it is very, very challenging, and all the opportunities that they are limited with, their access to the financials that also limit. So this is briefly a summary of what they go through.
Fauzi, what's the situation like in Pakistan specifically? What does disproportionately affected for women look like exactly?
Yeah, it's quite hard, because the women, particularly women in the rural areas, where we recently in the last year 22, we had the massive floods that actually caused a lot of problem, and even till today, there are areas where the water is still standing because it could not drain out, and this had basically changed the life of these women living in those areas. And they, all of their whole routine, the setup, their house, the life of their children, family, agriculture, livestock, everything was upset, and still is, because they lost a lot of their income opportunities also, because the opportunities are already comparatively limited for them. And then in a disaster, they are the last ones to recover from that kind of a situation. And even similarly to the urban areas, there are different kind of challenges, but the challenges in the rural are much stronger and much difficult, because the most important is the access anywhere. Access to allocation, access to education, to hospital facilities, or their income generation, or other activities also, let alone any social activities they have. But it's the necessity things for the family, and for which are most important, they are lost.
Based on everything you said there, it's so frustrating to hear that women have very little to no negotiation power in the home or workplace. It feels as though we're still living back in the Stone Age.
Yes, it's quite challenging. It's difficult, definitely. But then again, I would say there are women like myself who are working on climate change, who are basically are actors of bringing change. They are also many. They have been supporting these women. We even recently, on 8th March, we launched Gender and Climate Award, where there were three very, from the grassroots, they have taken interesting initiatives and they received that award. So there are many such examples also. They are the factors of change also. They are the ones who are they themselves become institutions. So they bring the change. If they are they are determined, they are committed to bring the change, they will. So that is also another encouraging point as well. And in Pakistan, there are many such options also.
You're absolutely a bright light in the dark, Fawzia. We commend you for your commitment, your work and your ethic, obviously. Thank you so much for your time and appearing on Just 2 Degrees. Thank you.
Thank you.
Concern over climate change is growing around the globe as increasing numbers of people start to notice and even find their lives seriously impacted by odd weather. But what many believe and say about the crisis is far from science. Sarah Bolter separates truth from myth surrounding the realities of global warming.
While governments increasingly recognize a climate crisis is underway, many people continue to doubt global warming because climate change myths are everywhere. Here are a few of the most common. Myth number 1, the climate always changes, it's nothing new. It's true. For billions of years, the Earth's climate has changed. But the difference between that and what's happening now can be summed up in terms of speed. According to NASA, the globe is warming at a rate unseen in the last 10,000 years. Studies of tree rings, ocean sediment, coral reefs, and rocks show it's roughly 10 times faster than the average rate of warming after an ice age. And carbon dioxide from human activity is increasing 250 times faster than natural sources produced after the last ice age. Other signs of acceleration can be seen in sea level rise, ice sheets shrinking, and extreme weather events. Myth number 2, there's no global warming because it's freezing outside. Temperature extremes and unseasonably cold weather are becoming more common around the world, causing some to question global warming. But weather and climate aren't the same thing. Climate is the average weather pattern for a region during a specific time. It describes wide-ranging temperature shifts that take years. Weather changes by the minute, hour, day, and season. And scientists say climate change will continue to fuel more extreme weather. Myth number 3, carbon dioxide isn't a problem because plants need it to live. Carbon dioxide itself isn't a problem. It's true that at healthy levels for the ecosystem, plants store and remove it, maintaining a balance. But the problem is that they can't remove it at the same rate humans are producing it. And as more and more forests are being cut down to grow food, the ecosystems that absorb CO2 get smaller and smaller. Scientists say the Earth hasn't seen this level of CO2 for 800,000 years. Myth number 4, animals will adapt to climate change. Animals and plants do have the ability to adapt to change, but that change usually happens slowly over long periods of time. Some are already moving to new areas or adapting to more rapid climate change, but for many, it's a different story. The World Wildlife Fund puts the current extinction rate at 1,000 to 10,000 times higher than would happen without humans around. Damage to ecosystems by global warming and severe weather changes are said to be making it harder for many species to survive. Scientists say the Earth is likely already seeing its 6th mass extinction event. Myth number 5. Climate change is a future problem. According to scientists, we only have a little more than a decade to limit global warming enough to avoid climate breakdown. Increasingly erratic weather, human and animal migration, disease, conflict, and instability are all signs that man-made climate change is the biggest environmental crisis of our time. Myth number 6. There's no point in doing anything. It's too late. While the planet is already experiencing devastating impacts of climate change, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says taking action now with the right policies can steer us clear of the worst effects. It's still possible to reach net zero carbon emissions and limit warming. The technology and know-how exists to achieve these goals by 2050. But energy companies, governments, manufacturers, and many more have to work together. And individuals can make a difference by choosing environmentally sustainable foods, products, and modes of travel.
That's how we wrap this episode of Just 2 Degrees. You can see this episode again and other climate-related content on YouTube. Until next time, bye.